Why do smart people keep choosing the wrong partners over and over again? Have you ever wondered this? Maybe you've done it yourself. Why is somebody who's intelligent or who knows what they want in a person, who's emotionally aware, who's maybe done the work and super capable in other areas of their life, still end up in the wrong relationships or aren't able to find a relationship that match? I never introduced myself. By the way, my name's Dawn Bennett. I've been in the alternative healing world for 26 years now. I work with people doing emotional freedom techniques, relationship coaching, hypnosis, unconscious mind work, all kinds of different things. But my job is really to help people love because the relationship you desire and deserve starts with you. So, how is it that you can read all the books, you can do all the things, set up all the boundaries, and still attract the wrong person? So we're going to talk about this today. We're going to talk about it from a few different angles. We're going to talk about why the unconscious mind draws us to certain people. We're going to talk about how to validate or filter out in an easier way potential partners. And also, how do you make it more intense to create intimacy? And I'm not just talking about sexual intimacy, I'm talking about all levels of intimacy, emotional, physical, intellectual, spiritual, any kind of area where you can connect really strongly as a couple. Because here's the problem that I see is that our unconscious mind, which is the part of us that drives to the store when you don't remember driving there, right? It's what brings us to places based upon our values, our beliefs, and basically what was programmed into us about what a relationship looks like or doesn't look like, what we're supposed to do or not do, tolerate or not tolerate, how we're supposed to act or not act, how we're supposed to engage or not engage with another human being that we're attracted to and want to create a partnership. Most of that was developed before the age of 7. So we learned that from society, from religious or societal backgrounds, from the movies that we saw, from the books that we read. And so what happens is that our unconscious mind draws up these rules around relationships. And that's all fine and good, but the challenge is that often the rules that are in our unconscious mind aren't the same as the rules of our conscious mind or even our heart. So let me give you an example. If you grew up in an area where relationships weren't safe, maybe your mom and dad fought a lot, or maybe you only had one parent, or maybe you watched abuse or were part of abuse. And now you start looking for a relationship. There's a piece of that dynamic that even though your heart goes, I don't want that kind of drama. I want someone that's loving and connected and kind and peaceful and can communicate. But your unconscious mind goes, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that is. So you're saying, hey, here's what I want. What I don't want is someone that's abusive or someone that's narcissistic. And your unconscious mind goes, oh, you don't want narcissism? Oh, you don't want? Wait, but now I'm focusing on what I don't want. And it starts pulling it in. Also, the unconscious mind recognizes as safe that which is familiar. So, what that means is, even though on a conscious level, you may be going, no, I am never going to deal with that again. When you meet another person that has similar traits, unless you've done the deep unconscious work, the brain kind of goes, oh, that person seems really comfortable. There's something about that person that really attracts me to them. There's something that feels like we've known each other for a long time. And yes, of course, that can be a past life or a soulmate connection, of course. And it can also be the unconscious mind going like, oh, yeah, 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 yeah. So you know what? This is the same relationship you've been in multiple times, but in a different body. Or maybe they have some of the aspects of some of the more toxic or the unhealthy relationship dynamics that you've been around or seen, and they recognize it. And so the unconscious mind starts pulling in those people because it's your unconscious and energetic resonance. And what do I mean by energetic resonance? However you are, whoever you are, however you vibrate draws in a certain type of vibration. Have you ever noticed that people are always really in a victim kind of space, tend to draw victimy kinds of things? Things just tend to happen to them over and over and over again. And of course, bad things happen to good people too. This is not me saying, oh, you have to be in a perfect energetic state all the time to attract your partner or to be, that's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is there's a level of resonance, right? And when we're attracted to people that feel familiar, sometimes the familiarity is around that old pain, which is why you see your friends or you see family members, or maybe even you yourself have gotten into relationship dynamics that you're like, ah, how did I do this again? Now, maybe it was softer this time. Maybe the person that you dated had slightly better communication skills than the last few people that you've dated, or they were less cruel, or they were less narcissistic, or they were less crazy, or they were less whatever word you want to put on it. Yet there was still a resonance there. And so, what happens is that not only can our conscious and unconscious mind, but also then our egos get involved because we say, oh, well, I've done this before. And there are times where people will stay in a relationship because their ego or their fear hold them there. In other words, there's all these excuses. There's all these stories made up by the conscious mind because the conscious mind, which is our thinking mind, if we're going to keep it simple, loves making up stories. Like this is the mind that's like, oh, this is what's going to happen in this conversation and what I'm going to say and then what they're going to say and then what I'm going to say and then what they're going to say, or what's going to happen with this happens, and it's the worry and it's the anxiety. The conscious mind is always thinking, not always thinking, but it often thinks around like future stuff and makes up stories, or it goes in the back and it looks at what's happened in the past and it starts making up stories. Oh, what they meant by this text was, what they meant by that statement was, what I should have done, or here's what they thought about me because of that situation, right? So our conscious mind is constantly making up stories to fill in the whys. Why did this happen? Why didn't that happen? Here must be the reasons. And the conscious mind is just this amazing storyteller that doesn't want to shut up, right? And so when we start getting into our relationships, when we start dating, our conscious mind and our ego can start collaborating and being like, well, you don't really have the money to leave. Well, really, you should stay for the kids. Well, really, you know how to handle a person like this. Well, really, it's not that bad. Well, really, you're not going to find somebody else because you're too old or you're too young or you're too this, you're too that. And so you should put up with this situation. And so our unconscious seeks familiarity instead of joy. Our nervous systems read that predictability as safe, even if it's painful, even if it's hurt, even if it's toxic. And then our conscious mind comes in and starts creating the stories around it, around how it's not as bad as that other person. Or they seem like they're getting better, or I'm able to communicate with them more, right? So we have all these stories that then keep us caught in relationship. So what I'm having you look at is where in your life, where in your unconscious mind do you have stories, rules, behaviors, patterns that are in your unconscious and conscious mind that keep bringing you to the same person? Because that's where it feels familiar. So how do you keep running into the same people? How do you keep attracting the same people? Because you're in an old identity in a way. You're standing in an old energy. You're looking at all the things you don't want. And when you're looking at what you don't want, that's exactly what you attract, unfortunately. And so the trick is, or the strategy is, or the idea is, how do I actually step into being the person that I want to date's energy? So here's what I mean by that. So I know that the person that I want to date, the person I'm going to marry long term, not even the person that I'm going to date, the person I'm going to be with long term, lives in love and joy, and that's how they lead, and they've got a very strong masculine frame. So when I know that, and if I want to sit around grumpy all day, it's like, okay, not that it's not okay to be grumpy. And is a person that's really leading in love and light and joyfulness and playfulness going to want to be with someone who's always crabbing or bitching or complaining or coming up with excuses or always whining about stuff? No, they're going to want someone else who kind of meets them in that happy, playful spot. where you can both emotionally navigate. A guy in his masculine frame is going to want a woman that can drop into her feminine structure. So, how do I, as an individual, step into that joy, that peace, that happiness every day in my life? Not out of force, but where am I actually choosing to be? Right now, I'm really upset about that. I'm going to acknowledge the upsetness. I'm going to work through it. I'm going to shift whatever made me upset if I can. Sometimes we can't control outside circumstances, and this has to happen every 5 minutes for a while. But when it comes down to it, how do I become that person? Because I am that person inside. Because if I wasn't that person inside, I wouldn't desire that in myself or in someone else. So, how do I actually peel off the layers of shit or of training or of the conscious mind's stories about what's happening in order to step into my light, in order to step into my love, in order to allow myself to soften into a feminine frame? And that doesn't mean that I can't get in my masculine when I have to in order to work, in order to get stuff done. But if I want to attract that kind of man, need to step that energy into a way that that man can be like, oh, look at her over there. She's super fun and playful and joyful. Every time I run into her, she seems to have a smile on her face. So, who do you need to be to attract the person that you want? Because another challenge that I see is that we either want someone to pull us out of a hole or we want someone to pull us up and there's nothing wrong with having a relationship dynamic where we help each other, right? This is what it's all about, is synergistic. And yes, your soulmate, your life partner, when you feel safe with them, will actually allow some of the deepest wounds to show up. But my point is, sometimes when we meet people when we're dating, we mistake intensity of connection for actual intimate connection. So, have you ever had an instant spark with somebody? We're like, this is totally it. Maybe it was the testosterone or estrogen, the lust hormones kicking in, or maybe it was just you had a really super amazing conversation. And you were like, oh my gosh, I haven't had a conversation like that forever. This has got to be the person. I love having this conversation. And all of a sudden, now you're getting into this. And later you realize it was either chaos, design disguised as chemistry, or it was, yeah, you guys really had a bond over XYZ subject. But when it comes down to who they are as a person in the world, they're not actually a good fit for you. Because this can happen to us often. So when I teach my Learning to Find Love course, for example, we outline what are the traits that you want in a partner, and we narrow it down to the top 5. We go through a whole process of like what worked in relationships, what didn't work in past relationships. We turn all those positive and we categorize them, and then I put them through a grid. So I help people really find like what does it look like for them when they meet the partner, or how are they filtering partners as they come in to see like do they actually have the traits that I need in the world that will really serve me, and then I can serve them back, right? Where we can create that really powerful relationship. And so when we look at that, we also look at what are the counter evidences. Because the challenge I see is we'll look at somebody, and I've done this. I did this a little bit with my most recent relationship where they checked off most of the boxes. But I even knew that they didn't check off one of the major boxes. But he used to be that way. And he said, oh, you know what? I used to be that way, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go back to that. I just got kind of out of the habit. I got out of the rhythm. I got blah, 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 blah. And it never happened. And that's fine. My point of this is when we look at the counter evidences, so someone's a good communicator. Good communication for me may be defined as something different than good communication for you, right? So what I consider really good communication is someone that can sit down and we can talk about an argument and we can go through every single aspect of it. Good communication for me is open honesty where we could talk about any aspect of our lives. Even if it feels shameful or embarrassing or, oh my gosh, they're going to judge me, or the fear comes up around sharing with that, good communication to me means that level of depth and intimacy and talking. So then a counter evidence would be someone that keeps their things really superficial, right? For example, I was in a relationship where we could talk really easy about politic dynamics. I don't even like politics that much. It's not my thing, but he was so into politics. So we'd talk about politic dynamics and what I believe versus what he believed and what we'd seen and what we experienced and what we heard and blah, blah, blah. And we get in these really great conversations. But the second it got to any deeply emotional, anytime I sat him down to talk about a relationship or a hurt or something I needed, he'd blow me off, right? Or he would give me some emotion back around, like, yeah, here's what I'm feeling about that. Here's what I'm thinking about that. Let me process that, which is all like great. But then that it would never go deeper. And then we'd have the same conversation over and over and over again because things didn't change, right? So, what I'm saying here is sometimes it's like, okay, so someone can have a checklist of things, but it may not be in the ways that you need them. You may have on your list, do you think that you want someone that's financially stable? That's great. But what happens if they lose their job? What happens if, because anybody can go from rich to poor in a minute, and anyone can go from poor to rich in a minute, right? Rich to poor in a minute can be anything from the stock market to a medical emergency to a disaster, a natural disaster of some sort, right? And going from poor to rich can be like an amazing opportunity, a breakthrough in a business, a really amazing raise. It can come from the lottery. It can come, people can shift financial states very quickly. So, how do you actually know that the trait of financial stability is there in a person? What's different than them just having money? What does that mean to you? So, if they're financially stable and that's something that you need, what does that actually look like? Because if you're just like, oh, looking at somebody that's got some money, they're willing to take you out, or you see that they have a nice house, or you see that they have good clothes or a nice car, or whatever it is that you're evaluating that on, but they're super far in debt, or they're really irresponsible with money, or maybe they're showing off somehow. Is that a counter evidence for you or not? So sometimes the reason why really smart people are getting into relationships with people that aren't really the right partner is because we're not actually looking for what we think we're looking for. Are we looking for financial stability? What does that mean? How do I know that person is financially stable? And is it about financial stability that I'm actually looking for? Or is it someone that is so tenacious that they will make it through anything? So even if they lost anything and everything in a moment, they would be willing to work to rebuild it, to create a quality of life or of safety. Maybe that's actually what you're looking for, not the financial piece. So often, the reason why we end up with the wrong partner as well is because what we think we want is actually not what we want. And I see this going on all the time when I put up YouTube videos and when I watch other creators and I watch other coaches and the comments that come through on the section. It's like, "Oh God, you can't trust a man to do that," or "Oh God, women don't even know what they want," or whatever. And it's true that often we don't look deep enough to actually know what it is that we want and need. We're not looking at that deeper level. So then it's like, "Oh, yeah, I want a guy that takes me out." Well, what does that provide you? Is that providing you with a feeling that you need? And will that feeling keep lasting? Is that actually what you want long term forever? Or is it something deeper? What do you actually want? What do you actually need? Need from your heart level, need from your gut level. How do you know? Because we can mistake the intensity of the playfulness or of having shared values or of hiking together or of playing chess together or of really amazing sex or whatever and being like, this is the one. But really, it was just something shared that wasn't actually lifelong. Now, there are also relationships that we're meant to have to learn, to grow, to change, to find ourselves deeper. Maybe we're there to synergize them in some way, or what's the word I'm looking for? It starts with an S. Anyway, kind of push or encourage their lifeline, for lack of a better word. Their, I can't remember the word. Anyway, they're on a path. You come, you kind of knock them off the path in a really good way, right? Or they come and knock you off your path in a really good way, right? So sometimes people are meant to come into our lives in that capacity. So I also want you to understand sometimes these relationships that we see as failures are actually opportunities for growth. And so some of that intensity, some of that intimacy, some of that attachment that we had actually came from the needed lesson or who we were as an identity or who they were as a person at that moment in time. That was the catalyst. That was the word I was looking for. That is the catalyst for us to change. Because another challenge I see, so even when we're clear on what we want, and even when we're clear on the deeper needs, and even when we're clear on what does it look like if they don't have it in the way that I need, sometimes we can outgrow a person or outgrow a situation or outgrow a pattern that we're in. So I've seen this both in the dating world and with people in relationships, where the dynamic of the two people has shifted so much that they've outgrown each other or they've shifted away from each other. I think the best way I heard this is one of the people in my homeopathic school at one point in time said, yeah, we just ended up being like onions and ice cream, where they're both super good, but they don't really belong together. And so that's what can happen. And sometimes, especially if you're doing a lot of work, you're watching videos like this, you're looking at your attachment styles, you're doing healing, you're letting go of trauma, you're manifesting, you're doing all the things, right? So sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm actually just too self-aware to connect. Maybe I'm getting too picky now. Maybe I'm too old, or I live in too small of an area, or there's no one left here. A lot of people run into this point where we finally have had all of our learning, quote unquote, learning relationships, right? Obviously, we're going to learn from every relationship we have, from family to friends to coworkers to people in the grocery store, right? We have relationships with everybody. So we are always learning from relationship. But there can be this gap period when we do some deep work or when we really shift into a different level of identity, a different outlook in life, and really say, Carolyn Miss will talk about it. I think she talks about it as the victim inside of us, right? The victim is an archetype. So we can fall into a negative victim of like, oh, poor me, this happened to me and it's so sad and la, 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 la. But the victim in the positive part of us, which is really what it's there for, is the one that goes, I am never, ever going to put up with that again. I will never tolerate XYZ. I will never XYZ. And the victim is looking for that. Sometimes looking for that, and we think, "Oh, it found it," and we pull it in as if we're supposed to be in another relationship. But other times we're like the victim's like, "No, that's that." You're like, "Oh, I'm listening now. I know that actually I'm seeing that person really clearly, not because I'm attracted to them, but because they're resonant, because that is the thing that I said I'd never do again." Right? And so we can have this moment where we go through big transition, where there's this gap period, where it feels like love is harder to find because we're unavailable to anything less than what we desire. And this can also be a point where people go, you know what? I'm out. I'm never dating again. I'm not going to be able to find the person that I appreciate. All men are narcissists. All women are crazy. I know I use those examples all the time, right? But we shut down our hearts or we close off and we go, nope, I'm done. But does that really serve us? Because the whole reason of getting in relationships in the first place is because we wanted a partner. So is closing down our heart and pretending like we don't actually want anyone to serve us? It doesn't. So then what we get to do instead is we get to actually sit into this place of like, okay, I am open to love. Why? Because I love myself and I know that I desire a partner to share travel with or a partner to be with. Or maybe I'm polyamorous and I want multiple partners in this very structured way. It doesn't matter what I want or what that looks like or how it's structured. What matters is that I know I can identify it. I hold myself to that. And I hold other people to that. And when people don't match that, then I have an easy chance to say, you know what? You are a great person, but you're not the right person for me. I actually just had one of my students who bought my Learning to Find Love course. He did it completely virtual. He actually found the course because he had a 3 hour conversation with a woman who then the next day was like, you know what? I actually went through and looked at the traits that I need, and you're not quite right. And he was like, what do you mean? And they had a huge conversation. He took the course and went, oh, and he started looking through the people that he was dating in a different way, through a different lens. And he said the quality of the people I was dating got better and better, and people got closer and closer. But I kept hearing what you said, not to settle for anything less than what I truly desired. And he found his soulmate within 2 months. So I've seen people find it in 2 months, 4 months, a year. Most 80% of the people that take the class find a soulmate if they're following the program and actually dating and stuff, find a soulmate within 2 years, which is pretty amazing. But the point that I'm trying to talk about here is that when we get more particular and when we get more refined, we also set our energy structure around that. So now we're vibrating at a different level, we're attracting at a different level. And so it seems like love is harder to find because we're going, there are all these people that aren't right for me. But that's great because they're right for someone else. And so you get to wait. And so I was in a conversation with a friend about this the other week when we were on a hike, and he's like, the higher vibration you go, or the more you learn, the more you set your standards, in some ways, the lonelier it becomes because there's less people that are willing to do the work to get there. And I'm not saying you have to be on any level to find a partner. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is if you feel like there's nobody out there who can meet you, trust. Drop into your heart. Let go of that belief and really start knowing and imagining and creating it. Who am I when I am with that person, right? This healing shifts your energetic availability because the quiet you have between these partners is very sacred. You're recalibrating for someone new. You are unavailable for anything less. And so when you look at it this way, and when you start looking at why am I choosing the wrong partners? What am I seeing or not seeing? What do I believe about what I deserve? Do I believe I'm worthy? Do I love myself? If I don't love myself, I'm going to have a hard time sometimes finding the right partner. Unless I find a partner who just wants to shower me with love forever and that's their role, because some people do. That is their role and those people match and it's like perfect. It's amazing. And that's beautiful, right? But I'm saying for most people, the general public, they get tired of one person needing all the time. So, how do you find that? What do you need to shift and get to shift inside of yourself? And how do you get to align yourself with your ideal partner? Because the relationship you desire and deserve starts with you. And so, my action for you is to envision being in a relationship that doesn't require you to shrink, that doesn't require you to manage, where you're equal, right? Where you've got them, if whether you're in a lesbian or gay or multiple relationship, right? But there's usually someone that holds like a masculine style frame, and there's someone that's got the feminine in between. Because we all have divine feminine, divine masculine, and toxic feminine and toxic masculine. We all have all four. It's just what in relationship do we hold them? And so then what you get to do is you get to really start imagining that relationship where love feels calm, clear, aligned to you, and not to love for anything less. And if you're curious, my Learning to Find Love is always available online on demand, forever access. Anyway, remember that you are love, you are loving, and you are lovable. Thanks for joining. Make sure you subscribe.